Agora, em dezembro de 2012, completam-se os 35 anos da morte de Charlie Chaplin. Ele morreu exatamente no dia de Natal. Muito mais do que um cômico, muito mais do que um cineasta, o Chaplin era um grande humanista. Ele não pensou duas vezes antes de fazer um filme manifesto contra Hitler. Mas você já parou para pensar que existem algumas semelhanças curiosas entre Chaplin e Hitler? Então veja só nessa matéria especial do Cine Mundi.
A remarkable new discovery in the Chaplin Villa at Vevey, Switzerland. In the film vault are the famous comedies, The Gold Rush, City Lights, which are known to the entire world. What was not known lay in the cellar for decades. 2 suitcases belonging to Sidney Chaplin, Charlie's brother, full of curious little boxes which turned out to contain amateur film. Chaplin shot his film in black and white, but this footage takes us behind the scenes in color. It adds another dimension to an extraordinary story, the confrontation between Adolf Hitler and Charlie Chaplin through the making of a highly controversial motion picture released in 1940 called The Great Dictator. Charlie Chaplin, the little tramp, and Adolf Hitler, the leader of Germany, had more in common than just a moustache. They were born in the same week of the same month of the same year. A few years before Chaplin became famous as the tramp, Hitler was a tramp. Both were outsiders who left their homeland to conquer the world. They became the best loved and most hated men of their time. In every country, Chaplin was the symbol for laughter. Hitler, the symbol for destruction. His war cost 55 million lives. But in the 1930s, he seemed unstoppable. World leaders sought to appease him. Most of Hollywood chose to ignore him. But one voice would speak to millions. One man would have the courage to challenge the world's most dangerous leader, Charlie Chaplin. The climax of The Great Dictator. Chaplin's Jewish barber is mistaken for the dictator and is called upon to speak.
Excellency, the world awaits your word.
Chaplin had never spoken on the screen until he made this film. But he felt if he could talk from his heart, he might even be able to shorten the war. What was it that would bring Chaplin and Hitler into such a unique confrontation? Chaplin was born in 1889 in the South London slums he would recreate so often in his films. His father was a music hall singer, as was his mother. Because of her mental trouble, Charlie and his brother were sent to the workhouse. Working people were terrified of this fate, which Chaplin vividly conveyed in The Kid, when the law comes to take the child to the workhouse. Chaplin escaped into the theatre, became a music hall comedian, and sailed on his first tour to America in 1910. Hitler came from a lower middle-class family at the border of Austria and Germany. He hated school and learned very little, but was always a ringleader. His father was a brutal man, a customs officer who had married one of his servants. Hitler's mother was probably the only woman Hitler ever loved. She protected him from his father. As soon as he could, he went to Vienna, where he hoped to become an artist. The young Hitler refused to do any work other than drawing. but he was considered no better than competent. His failure in the entrance exam for the Vienna Academy devastated him. How different history might have been had Adolf Hitler been accepted. Charlie captured the Kaiser at the end of Shoulder Arms. The Chaplin films did more than any others to raise morale. "20 years later, Chaplin would restage World War I for The Great Dictator, picking up where Shoulder Arms left off, wearing German uniform.
Big Bertha, a cannon that could hurl a projectile 100 miles, was this day to make its first appearance on the Western Front, was this day to strike terror into the hearts of the enemy. 75 miles away was her target, the Cathedral of Notre Dame.
And clear! Ready! Fire!
He was the little guy who, they loaded it up and then he had to pull this string that fired it. And he had such a funny way of doing it that watching this, I screamed with laughter and it ruined the take. And he was delighted, my father. I thought he'd be furious. God, that cost me a fortune, and he loved it.
Hitler knew the value of film, but audiences did not respond to him as a silent actor.
I remember seeing a silent newsreel of Hitler and thinking suddenly, this man looks absolutely ridiculous, and just like Chaplin would look if he were playing such a part.
Against a background of aggression and appeasement, Chaplin announced his film in October 1938. The British, anxious not to upset Hitler, said they would ban it. To general astonishment, Chaplin went ahead.
Every one of my friends, many of whom were Jewish, like myself, felt that a David had arisen, a comic David, to fight Goliath. And we could only be happy.
1945, the last shots of Hitler before his suicide. Hitler's world lay in ruins. When the Reich Chancellery was captured by the Russians, they found nothing but rubble. But one object remained intact. With The Great Dictator, Chaplin had strengthened millions through the power of laughter at a time when madness and darkness covered the world. Despite his plea for sanity, the political climate of the McCarthy era forced him into exile. In 1952, he was locked out of the United States. But one country would welcome him back.
Now the train draws into Waterloo Station, only a short distance from Chaplin's actual birthplace. And what a great reception greets him and his family from the thousands who have gathered to welcome him home. When he left America a week ago, Charlie was worried in case our affection for him had dimmed. Londoners show him now that he need not have worried. We can never forget him or the laughter he brought into our lives. Throughout the world, he is loved for his genius. Chaplin was not born great, yet in a lifetime crowded with laughter and tears, he has achieved an everlasting greatness.
E o curioso é saber que Chaplin escreveu, produziu e dirigiu O Grande Ditador antes mesmo dos Estados Unidos entrarem definitivamente na Segunda Guerra Mundial. E hoje a gente fica por aqui. Semana que vem, mais um programa Cine Mundi com todas as novidades desse delicioso mundo do cinema. Até lá!